Hey there guys, thanks for tuning in. So trying to record a video on the forward facing camera for a change. Not sure how it's going to pan out, but I'll give it a go. So apologies if the quality isn't as good as usual, we'll find out. So today I'm going to talk to you about nootropics, that's smart drugs. I'm going to talk in a bit of detail about how they work, whether you should use them, what the best ones are, what the stack I use is, and my thoughts in general on the topic. In the past on this channel I've reviewed things like modafinil, piracetam and Siltep, and I've talked about my thoughts on it, whether or not I'd use it, but I haven't talked in general about nootropics, what they are, etc. So I thought I'd go over that in a bit more detail and tell you why I use the supplements that I do use, because if you watch those videos you'll know that I think not to use those ones that I just pointed out, with the exception of maybe Siltep in small doses. So basically, nootropics are supplements or drugs or even foods that improve your brain power in one or multiple regards. So these work in a variety of different ways, but the ones like the ones that I just mentioned, modafinil, etc., and the ones that are often most popular, they work by altering levels of neurotransmitters. So basically, your brain is made up of billions of neurons, which are cells, and they're all connected. You probably know this. It looks kind of like a mind map. They're a web of interconnected spider tendril things. And each one of these represents some kind of experience. When they fire, you experience that stimuli. So for instance, should a neuron in your occipital, your visual cortex, your occipital lobe, your visual cortex fire, then you'll experience like a pixel light up. So that neuron literally corresponds with that pixel. Likewise, if something was to fire, if a neuron was to fire within your auditory cortex, you'd hear a slight sound. But of course, they all do lots of different things. They can also map memories. So should a particular neuron fire, then you might remember a smell, or you might remember a color or something that happened. Of course, most memories are the result of multiple connections all firing at once, and that's why when we think of one thing, we're often reminded of another thing, because it's all kind of interconnected like this. And as you learn, you form new neural connections and new neurons. That's called neurogenesis, which was thought to be impossible until relatively recently. This is the basis of brain plasticity, and it's also how memory works, the formation of new connections and also the growth of new neurons. So when you see something and you want to remember it, your brain will create a little connection. The more often you repeat that experience, the more often you think of it or experience it, the stronger that connection will get over something called long-term potentiation, and the stronger it gets, the easier it is to remember. So that's all might sound like a little bit of nonsense, but ultimately you're left with this big, massive web of interrelated ideas and thoughts, and that is pretty much your personality. It's also the sum of all your memories. It's how you learn, it's how you concentrate, it's how you experience things, and it's called a connectome. And some personality theorists say that we are our connectome. So that's a very basic look at how the brain works, and that's what you need to know how these nootropics work. Because you see, when a neuron fires and a connection lights up, it's not just binary, it's not just on or off. It can also contain information about that firing. And this is where the neurotransmitters come in, which are tiny chemicals, a little bit like hormones, and they are contained in something called neurovesicles, which are at the end of each neuron, at the synapse, which is the gap where it has to travel across when it's communicating with another neuron. So what happens is it fires through an electrical charge, it releases neurotransmitters, and they go to the next neuron, and this then tells you things like whether or not what happened was important, whether or not it makes you happy or whether it makes you sad. So it's the kind of emotional content, and it's also the content that tells your brain how to deal with it, like this is important, I need to focus on it. So dopamine is the neurotransmitter related with attention and focus and motivation, and when that fires, your brain is like, this is important, I need to look at it and I need to remember it. So if you see a lion, you get a bunch of dopamine because it's like, this is a memorable experience, I need to think about it. You also get a bunch of norepinephrine, which is essentially like adrenaline, and that gives you more focus. It takes your attention away from other things and it amps up your system. It's what's responsible for the fight or flight response. And then you have other neurotransmitters like serotonin, which is to do with happiness, and all the other endorphins. You have things like acetylcholine, which is to do with learning. You have things like melatonin, which is to do with sleep. So basically they all do different things, and depending on which neurotransmitters are released, that dictates how you respond, how you behave, how you learn. So what the nootropics do is to mimic the effects of these neurotransmitters, to enhance them, to suppress them. You've got ones that you don't necessarily want, like GABA. GABA makes you feel sleepy. It's one of the ones that tells us when it's time to go to sleep and inhibits the activity of neurons. So some neurotransmitters work, some nootropics work by blocking or suppressing the release of GABA. One more thing you need to know, I'm really throwing some information at you here, I hope I'm explaining it all right, is that when the neurons fire, you have one end and it releases the neurotransmitters across this gap that I've said is called the synapse to the other end, and at the other end you have the receptors. Receptors are where the neurotransmitters fit in, and it's kind of like one of those games that kids used to play with the round pegs and the round holes and the square pegs and the square holes. In other words, you need to have the right receptors for the right neurotransmitters to fit into. So if you have more receptors, then you can have more of an effect from the neurotransmitters. If you have fewer receptors, then you can have less of an effect. So in other words, you can't just keep amping up a certain amount of neurotransmitter. It needs to have the receptors to go into. And likewise, when the neurotransmitters are just floating around and they're useless, they get reuptaken. The reuptake occurs through transporters, which basically clean up your unwanted neurotransmitters. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because some nootropics work by blocking the reuptake, the transporters. They mimic the appearance of neurotransmitters, they block the transporters, and this means you then have more of that neurotransmitter in your brain. This is the same way that antidepressants work. So for instance, you have serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, and they work by blocking the serotonin transporters, which means there's more serotonin in your brain, which basically floods you with good feeling. And the same thing is how a lot of recreational drugs work. So for instance, if you were to use something like cocaine, that works by suddenly, I think I've got the right one here. Oh no, I'm thinking of MDMA. It works by releasing all of this is ecstasy, works by releasing all of the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, I believe, and norepinephrine from the vesicles in your brain, so you just get suddenly flooded with them. It's very dangerous. I'm going to explain why. So basically, nootropics work in a very similar way to these, but a slightly less potent effect, otherwise they'd probably be illegal. And also, they're obviously focusing on the neurotransmitters that you want to use in order to make yourself brighter, better learner. So for instance, piracetam increases acetylcholine through one means and another. Modafinil increases dopamine and norepinephrine, and so does caffeine. Good old caffeine works by increasing dopamine, and these increase your focus. They increase your attention because you've got more of the neurotransmitter in your brain that tells your brain this is important, this needs to be learned, I need to remember this, and thus you get this kind of focus, this attention, and you can learn and you can work. That's the theory. This is how most nootropics work. A lot of the ones people want, Adderall, Siltep also increases dopamine, among other things. But the problem is with increasing a neurotransmitter is that the brain responds through something called tolerance and dependence. So say you're increasing, this is why you also shouldn't use recreational drugs, because it's very dangerous, it changes your brain chemistry. Basically, you keep increasing the amount of available neurotransmitter in your brain, so you keep flooding your brain with dopamine. Your brain says, right, well, I've got too much dopamine, I don't need that much, and so it gets rid of some of the dopamine receptors, which means you now need more dopamine to have the same effect on the brain that you used to. So in other words, you start to become tolerant to the substance that you're using, and also when you're not using it, you now have less dopamine. So actually, you're taking this nootropic to try and make yourself more focused, but in the rest of the time, you become less focused, and just to feel back to normal, you need it. And that's why many drugs like cocaine, it'll increase the feel-good hormones in your brain and neurotransmitters, but then it means that the rest of the time you're working at a deficit and you're just trying to get back up to that normal level. And of course, that's a bad thing. A lot of supplements people use for smart drugs like modafinil, they say are not addictive. You don't have the issues of tolerance and dependence, but I can't see this as being the case. I mean, even if you increase dopamine naturally through your own behavior, even by just watching porn, then your brain changes and you do get tolerance and dependence. So to say that something like modafinil won't cause that, I don't see how someone can say that. And from my own experiences, I did try it just to review. I could see how you could easily become addicted to something like that, and psychologically, if not in any other way. At the same time, they also don't know how a lot of these nootropics work. So say piracetam, that increases acetylcholine, which increases attention and learning. But at the same time, they don't actually know precisely how it's increasing acetylcholine. And to me, that's a warning sign, that's a red flag. And they haven't been studied that long term to know that they're completely safe. So that's another reason I don't recommend that one. At the same time, there are neurotransmitters we haven't even discovered yet, and they don't work in a vacuum. You can't just increase one and expect that to change. If you increase dopamine, you increase norepinephrine. Why? Because your brain says this is important, and so it also says I need to focus. So it changes the levels of everything. And when one hormone goes up, then another one goes up. So if you increase a feel-good hormone, often your brain will also increase like cortisol, the stress hormone, just in order to bring it up to that normal level. Cortisol will also increase when you use a nootropic like modafinil or even caffeine to increase dopamine and norepinephrine. It's the stress hormone. It makes you worried, and that's why you get that jittery, anxious feeling when you use a lot of these kind of things that are supposed to boost attention. And finally, you can't improve your brain by simply improving one neurotransmitter anyways, because, for instance, there's no such thing as the best way for your brain to behave. So say you increase dopamine, that's great for increasing focus, but actually there is evidence there, which you can read on my blog, I've talked about in more detail, to suggest that increasing your focus actually decreases creativity, because creativity occurs when you're relaxed, when you're in a flow state. I think anandamide is the neurotransmitter that increases that. What you need is for your brain to just wander, to just explore all these different ideas. And that happens when you're relaxed. When you're focused, you're only looking at the very kind of strong connections. You're focusing on specific neurons, but when you're relaxed, then you're able to spread out and look, and you find connections that you didn't see before, like the way that maybe one idea is connected to another, and this creates a new idea. A lot of people think that's where ideas come from. It's just you making new connections between existing thoughts in your brain. So the point is, you can increase focus, but then you're going to decrease creativity. And likewise, if you take something to increase creativity, you're going to decrease focus. So, there's no one way you need to be. Your brain needs to be able to flit from one thing to another. So just elevating one neurotransmitter is actually a fool's errand. So with all that in mind, do I think nootropics are a stupid idea? You shouldn't do them. It sounds like it, but no, actually, that's not what I'm saying. For starters, at least nootropics are trying to target the correct neurotransmitters. At least they're trying to improve your brain. We drug ourselves all the time in various different ways. Alcohol, for instance, and we know that's bad for us. We're not even trying to improve our brain. So don't have a massive go at people like, oh, nootropics is so dangerous, you're messing with your neurotransmitters. Well, yeah, you are when you have a cup of tea or when you drink alcohol as well. At least nootropics is trying to do the right thing. So I'm not demonizing it. I'm not saying it's really dangerous. And some people, they swear by modafinil, it's right for them. Great, cool, keep using it if you want. It's also illegal unless it's on prescription, so that's always something to consider. But that's the one thing. The second thing is that there are other types of nootropics that work in a different way, and those are much safer and, in my opinion, a much better way of going about it. Because, like I've said, what you really need your brain to be able to do is to switch its attention from one thing to another, and in doing so, release the neurotransmitters that are appropriate for that thing. And this comes down to basically mental discipline, your passion for what you're doing, how focused and switched on you are, and also just your brain's health, like the ability that it has to send signals across synapses, the amount of energy it has, how well slept you are. And this is how you really improve your brain. And the great thing about this is it also improves your general health, and it's protective against neurodegenerative diseases. Come on, all the things I've said, and that's the one I struggle with. So basically, the kind of nootropics that I recommend are all the ones that focus on increasing the communication between your neurons, increasing the amount of energy your brain is capable of using, etc. So, for instance, creatine. Creatine is a supplement that is used by bodybuilders often, as well as athletes, to get more energy, but it also has been shown in studies to help improve performance on IQ tests, on short-term memory tests, all these things. So what is in creatine? Creatine is basically a substance that allows your cells to recycle adenosine triphosphate, which is its main energy source. You have mitochondria in your cells, including your neurons, which use ATP, adenosine triphosphate, from your food as the energy source. But when it uses it, it becomes ADP and AMP. So basically you have three phosphates, adenosine triphosphate, and this is broken down into diphosphate and monophosphate, so a 2 and a 1. And in order to reuse that, they need to be recombined. And that's what creatine allows you to do. It allows you to reuse that kind of waste from your energy. So you get just a little bit more energy. And eventually it has to find other ways of getting energy to your body, which it does through pumping oxygen around your body. But just for the short term, this gives you that little bit of extra energy, which can help you to get a couple of extra reps in the gym. Also adds water retention to your muscles, so you look stronger. But moreover, it also increases your attention because you've got a little bit more energy in your brain, so you can focus for longer. So that's a really good one. And it's been shown to be protective against a range of neurodegenerative diseases. So great. Also, omega-3 fish oil, which is healthy in all kinds of ways. But the main reason I like it for the brain, it's a great antioxidant, so again it's protective, but the main reason I like it for the brain is that it can increase cell membrane permeability. What this means is your brain is made mainly of fat actually, and the fat that you eat is the fat that ends up in your brain. Omega-3 is a good type of fat for your cells to be made out of because it's flexible and it allows things to pass through, such as the neurotransmitters, such as the signals. So it actually increases the speed of your thoughts, and again studies have shown that it can boost memory, it can boost focus, attention, IQ performance, and again it's really good for you long term for preventing things like Alzheimer's etc. So another really good one to use, and it has other benefits as well. You can get it from fish if you want to get it from your diet. I eat a ton of tuna. Next up, coconut oil. This contains a certain type of fat called medium chain triglycerides, which the body processes in a certain way, and what you need to know is it basically gives you immediate energy straight to the blood, and at the same time it increases your production of ketones, which is the kind of energy you get when you're fasting, which your brain actually prefers this energy to glucose for certain functions. So basically what you're doing is you're giving yourself a sudden shot of useful energy. Again, it's a very good fat, and at the same time it increases the amount of omega-3 fatty acid in the important parts of your brain. It doesn't contain omega-3, but it increases omega-3. So these are synergistic, they work nicely together. Then we've got lutein. This is an interesting one because I'm actually experimenting with this. I read a study recently about lutein boosting the amount of AMP in the brain, AMPK, which is adenosine monophosphate. Let's see, I've got it written down. I did well remembering a lot of it. Protein kinase, something along those lines. Basically, this increases your performance of your mitochondria, or at least it has been shown to in mice in this one recent study, when taken with milk, full-fat milk, which aids with the digestion. I don't know whether it definitely works, but I wanted to review it, and I think it is working for me, actually. They found that when they gave this to the mice, they were able to run much farther of their own free will, suggesting they had much more energy, and they also lost fat as a result of that. And I thought it could work in a similar way to creatine, that it would also be able to boost your brain function as a result. And it's since I've been taking these that I've gone up to being able to write 20 to 30,000 words a day for my main copywriting job. So it seems good. I can't promise it's not a placebo, but if you want to read more about it, visit my blog. Then I'm taking vitamin D, which is a vitamin, and obviously, but it also works very much like a hormone, and it regulates your release of a lot of other hormones, specifically those relating to sleep. Take a shot of that in the morning. Most of us don't get enough vitamin D if we live in the UK because it is miserable out here. As you may know, you get vitamin D, your body produces it when it's stimulated to by the sun. So yeah, I'm taking this, and I believe it's aiding my sleep as a result. And finally, I haven't got the pot here, but I also like garlic extract, because it's a vasodilator, meaning it makes the blood vessels wider, allowing more blood and more oxygen and more nutrients to get to the brain. I'm also interested in experimenting with CQ10, but I'll write about that when I've actually given it a go. It's coenzyme Q10. So that's my nootropics stack, and it doesn't have this kind of immediate buzzing effect that some people like to get from things like modafinil. But to me, if you're really trying to boost your brain, you don't want a buzzing effect. Like if you're going for a buzzing effect, you're actually looking for something different. I'm sorry. What you want is just slow, steady, general brain improvement. And if you combine this with brain training, and I like to use a bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, which I believe can be used for increasing your brain performance to optimal level, not just treating mental disorders, but again, read about it on my blog. A better sleep Exercise is fantastic, by the way. It's been shown to stimulate neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells, as I was talking about, in all the important areas. It increases the number of mitochondria, which are the things that I was saying, the energy centers of your brain. So that gives you more ability to feel awake. Do you ever get that feeling where you just like, you're trying to do a math sum and you know you probably could do it, but you just can't quite be bothered to carry that number across, or you just can't quite be bothered to focus on what that person's saying? It's because your brain's out of energy. So you want to give your brain more energy. That's what's going to give you the ability to really improve your brain power in ways that kind of have noticeable results, practical applications. So exercise is fantastic for that, and it also increases your VO2 max, your ability to take oxygen into your blood and get it to your brain. So for all these reasons, exercise is fantastic, and I'm also experimenting with other things like light therapy. I do all these things, again, you can read about it on my blog. I like brain training games. I made one of my own called Debugger Brain Untraining, so check that out in the Google App Store if you're interested. Brain training apps and games in general haven't been proven to be particularly effective, but actually general computer games have been shown to be really good for your brain, so give those a go. Basically, focus on getting the right nutrients and minerals to make your brain faster and to protect your cells, and that's how you'll give yourself better brain power, much more efficient, much safer than boosting nootropics, which is essentially, I think, something people do because they want an escape. They want to get away from their usual selves. So I really think a lot of people, unfortunately, use those for the wrong reasons. I'm not saying they don't have a place. I would consider using something like a Siltep, like I said, when I really need a bit of focus, but you just use it on occasion. And I still drink loads of caffeine because I love tea and coffee, and I'm probably addicted, but hey, again, you can read about that on my blog. All these things that I've recommended are completely safe. They're also great for fat loss and things like that. Again, read about it on my blog. It would be better if you got it from your diet, but here's the thing, it's really difficult to get this many good things from your diet when you're trying to live on a budget. I mean, just eating tons of fruit and veg is fantastic for your brain, but fruit goes off all the time and it's expensive, and it's also full of sugar. So there's all these issues around it, and that's why I do use supplements. It's just easier, unfortunately. Eating protein is also very good for your brain, so you could consider my protein shake to be another one. Also, I think amino acid supplements have definitely got a place, but I'm going to be looking at that again more in future. So this has been a 23-minute diatribe on nootropics. I hope you found it useful. I hope you've been able to follow some of what I've said. I'm sorry if I've babbled on a little bit. I wasn't sure how much information to give versus just getting down to it. Maybe I'll do a simpler version of this in the future, but if you found it interesting or if you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're watching this shortly after I upload it, then Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I'll see you next time. Thanks very much, and bye for now.